Hi, everyone. As Jamie said, my name is Rachel Siegel, and I'm the Director of Strategic Programs at the Jewish Women's Foundation of New York. In this role, I've had the privilege of spending many hours with the incredible leaders of the collective, many of whom you've already heard from. And I'm so excited for you to hear from these four jewels who are all building power among women in Israel. My first question, which I'd like to direct at Michal Gera Margaliot, is Michal, could you give us an overview of what leadership looks like in Israel and what the structural barriers are that are preventing women from obtaining leadership positions?
So hi, everyone, and thank you so much for having me, and thank you for the incredible team of the Jewish Women's Foundation. And I know it's the first time, Rachel, that you are moderating a panel, and you're already amazing, and we love you very much. I am the executive director of Israel Women's Network, which is the largest advocacy organization in Israel regarding women's rights and gender equality. A few years ago, about half of the senior position of economic positions in the public sector were positioned by women. And including the head of the Bank of Israel and her deputy, and every single one of these women, when they finished their credential and left, were replaced by men. A year and a half ago, when the last working Knesset that we had finished her days at the end of 2018, there were 35 women at that Knesset. It was the first time that we passed the quarter, that it's 35 out of 120. It was the first time we crossed the line of 30 members of Knesset who were women. And we had a really important feminist year in 2019. The Me Too movement was huge here in Israel. We had elections in municipalities, and we were able to increase significantly the number of women. And then we got hit hard. We had 3 rounds of elections. There were less women who got elected at the final round, 29 women. But it's not only that there were less women who got elected, there were less senior. We call that Ezrat Nashim. They were pushed back. There were the back lines of the lists, and there were less feminists. And there are also 2 ultra-Orthodox parties in the Knesset that are holding over 10% of the seats that have no women from ideological reasons. So this is like, in a nutshell, what's happening in the political arena. And what we see and what we know, that even when we achieve something, even when we get something, it's not linear. And it can go back to the natural situation, which is very, very manly. So what we need is to change the laws. We need quotas. We need to have serious incentives to have women in higher positions in the Knesset, in the government. But in order for that to happen, we need for people to care. We need decision makers to care, and we need the public to care more. And we don't have it now. And I think that's maybe the most serious problem that we have in Israel, that except these groups of feminists that we are very upset every time we see that, it can go quietly. The fact that even when women are in position, they are replaced over and over by men.
Thank you, Michal. Mazal, I think that's a perfect segue to you because you're working on empowering feminist leadership. Can you tell us a little bit about the need for that and maybe expand on some of the incentives that you're working on to get women to run for office?
Mazal, you're on mute.
Okay, so thank you, Rachel, and you're doing a great job, and I'm welcoming my colleagues from Israel for the new cohort and wishing you a lot of good luck. It's a wonderful cohort to be in. And yes, I'm the executive director of WePower, and WePower in Israel acting and all of the years working to increase the number of women around the decision table in the public and political arena specifically. We are doing it by allocating women all over Israel, and I don't like to use the word convince, but yes, like convincing them that the role around the decision table is critical and very important. And as Michal said, what WePower seen as a purpose is that we don't only want to bring the women around the decision table, but we want them to have the gender equality, the gender perspective, the gender understanding, what are the roles around the decision table in terms of advancing other women, in terms of opening the path to other women that will come together with them, because we believe that currently when women are running for political position, they are running in a very patriarchal environment. And this changed all the political game. We see that the political game is very masculine, and we see that it's very aggressive, and we see even that women that are there are talking in the masculine and the patriarchal, they are kind of gaining the same language as the men. And we believe that only when we will be equal and we will get to the 50% equal representation of women and men, then the language will start and change. So what we are doing in our programs, and we are doing programs like leadership in the municipalities and all over Israel and College for Politics, what we are doing, we are bringing two legs to the program. The one leg is the gender, the sisterhood, the glass ceiling, all the gender terminations, and we are letting women to get familiar with the gender gap, okay? Because most of the people that are not dealing with the political or representation like all of us on the screen don't know that there is a gender gap. You know, in the 2018 elections, municipality election, we did a survey, and from 80% of the people that answered the question, how many mayors we have, 80% said that they know that they have 60 mayors, and we only had 6 mayors in 2018. So one thing is to bring the knowledge of gender, and then we are giving the knowledge of political arena, how the arena is active. We are giving tools of how to run a campaign, how to work with the public, how to strengthen your electoral power, because eventually political is the electoral power. And then we bring the two knowledges together, the two legs together, and we are speaking about women in politics and what are their position. And we know that women in politics is not important only for gender issues. Women, the perspective of women is important in security, in education, in health, in economic, in every, because we are good in all those arenas. Okay, we have wonderful women in Israel, but we need them to sit around the decision table and make the change from inside.
Thank you. That's a great segue to Yael. Yael, you've been working to promote Orthodox feminism in Israel. Can you tell us a little bit about what additional obstacles women in this community are facing?
Still muted.
Yael, you're muted.
Okay, now?
Yes.
So thank you very much for having me. It's very exciting to be here in JWFNY. You really managed to come up with this amazing convention. I just stepped down after 5 years being the executive director of Kolech. Kolech is the Orthodox feminist movement in Israel, and we further the rights and status of women in Jewish law, in the religious establishment, and in Jewish Israeli society. And we are promoting women to become religious leaders. And I would like to see women as rabbis, women who are rabbinic judges. As long as the institution exists, I would like to see a chief rabbi, which would be a woman. And in order for that to happen, women have to work very, very hard, especially after we see all the obstacles that we heard from Michal and from Mazal. I think that in the Orthodox community, things are even harder. I think that as general, this kind of society is more conservative with a small c. I think it comes together with being observant. I also think that people are used to see women not part of the public sphere. I mean, if you take, for instance, going to synagogue, and you're so used to not seeing women there, therefore it seems more natural for you than not to see them in other places. We are very lucky to have a new generation of women, scholared women, who learned Talmud, who learned Halakha, and they know the Torah very well. And now these women need to have horizon, need to have job opportunities, which unfortunately at this point they don't have many. And in Kolech, we actually promote these kind of women to find opportunities in which they can hold position. And then they need, of course, the support to do it together, because you really have to invent the wheel. And that's something that takes a lot of time. And not only that, one of the big obstacles that we have, and Susan mentioned it yesterday, the entwined relationship of religion and state that we have in Israel actually influencing everything we do, and makes it even more problematic.
Michal Avera Samuel, the Ethiopian-Israeli culture is also seen to be particularly patriarchal. Where do you see an opening for empowering feminist leadership within this community? And maybe you also want to talk just very briefly about your own story of how you went from immigrant to CEO.
Thank you, Rachel. It's great to be here also, and wonderful session. Being a newcomer to Israel, it's challenging. I left Ethiopia when I was 8 years old. We walked from Ethiopia to Sudan with whole my family. At the age of 8, I came to Israel. I came from 9 brothers and sisters. I am the youngest in the family, and my other sisters get married and even get engaged very early age. Lucky me, my father, the feminist father, unlike in the Portugal country, he decided, actually he chose me to be educated by even call me a name in an Amharic, saying Taukalech mean wise girl. Actually, he chose me to be educated. And then I feel I'm the activist since I get to Israel at the age of 8, 9. And from there, that's my real activist action began when I was in national service. I chose to go to volunteer a year in the absorption center, working with Ethiopian and Russian population to help them to choose a better education, to choose better housing environment. And then from there, that I knew that's the key to be part of the Israeli society and to be educated. It's the education, it was the part of our life. So I knew that even we, as a women, we became very independent, but still we didn't have as much power to lead and to take roles in the Israeli community. So we were fighting for many years But when I get to be a CEO of Fidel Association, it's a non-profit organization working with Ethiopian community, helping and empowering young leaders to be and to take role in their life, and actually to the younger generation start talking their own voice. Many years, the Israeli and the other authorities spoke about us. We brought them, we did for them, and we were the minority as a Black Jew in Israel. And the younger generation taking roles and saying, this is our time to say what's good for us. This is our time to lead our community and to say what's wrong, what's not wrong. And then to deal in the different area that if even in this in education, it's to change the image of the Ethiopian community. So the image been changed by many women. They're a leader, they're taking a part in the many non-profit organizations and being in higher education and taking a lot of roles. That's and at Fidel, we empower many women to take roles in this different environment. That we really happy and to see how how's the leaders becoming very important, not only with the community, Ethiopian community, also the Israeli society as the whole. The Ministry of Absorption Center, this is the Ethiopian lady is Pnina Tamenoshete. This is the highest level of the leaders that we are proud to say we achieved that in the Israeli community.
Yeah. Great, thank you. When we spoke in advance of this call, we discussed the impact that COVID-19 is having on women and on women's leadership around the world, presenting both new challenges and also new opportunities. Yael, how has COVID-19 amplified Orthodox women's voices or hindered them from taking on leadership?
Yeah. So I think it's exactly what you said. It did both things. For instance, I would refer to, I think, two topics. One is ritual baths. And we can see that when the pandemic started, a lot of rabbis just said, continue going to the ritual bath, there is no problem. But there were women, actually scholarly women, that learn halakha well, know the rules. One of them is a doctor. And they said to women, they announced it on Facebook in specific groups, and they said, take care of yourself and don't listen to that. You have to worry. You have to make sure. They put up a list of things that each woman need to check. And they said, it's up to you to decide whether to go or not to go. And when you go, you have to make sure that all these things are being taken care. Like there is the shift, there is the move from the rabbi saying what's right, what's wrong, and we're just doing it, to actually starting like from foundations from the bottom who are saying, take care of yourself and make sure you are making right decisions regarding halakha and regarding the pandemic. Another example for that is what's happening in shuls. Synagogues were closed down, and for many months now there are no shuls. And in the previous panel, I think it was Miriam who was talking about the power of the community, how Jewish life are so centered around the community about doing things together as a group. And surely just one of these examples. And when you don't have that, it makes things much more complicated. And then we're starting to have davening, praying together, either at gardens or at parking lots. So in one hand, there were lots of parking lots, places and streets, in street prayers that got themselves organized. And then sometimes they ask women not to come because only men are obligated, therefore only men should come because they had restrictions over the numbers. By the same time, in many places, including mine, I live in Modi'in, I participate in a prayer group that we are in the minyanei chatzerot, in the gardens. So in the gardens, each family sit together as a core family, which means men and women are sitting together. I sit next to my husband, next to my kids, my boys, my girls, and it's created a whole new experience of praying together, and which I think is beautiful. In a lot of these kinds of prayers, women have the chance to say divrei Torah, to speak out loud, and even more progressive minyanim. I know that they have partnership minyanim now on Zoom. Women have their chance to lead tefillah. And that's a great, this is a great change that is happening. And I think that after a long time of doing that, it's going to be the day after, when we go back to synagogue, it's going to be a very big question how we're going to get back to what it was, or we would be able to shift and move things along. I would also add maybe about the ultra-Orthodox community. Things are also happening there. And what we see is that, as we said, the pandemic is really threatening everything we know, everything that has to do with community and doing things together. And I feel that at this point, the ultra-Orthodox feel this pandemic is a real threat to the continuation of their life. And therefore, unfortunately, last week, when the government said that schools are not going back, one of the main rabbis, I'm not talking about side rabbi, but one of the main rabbis of the ultra-Orthodox Litai community said against the rules that the chederim, the schools for boys only, should go back to learn normally. And this is really, it creates a big problem here, the way the ultra-Orthodox and the Orthodox and the general community, it really, the reaction was very, very strong, because it really undermines what our base of living here together. And I think that he took this decision because to him, like, we feel that pikuach nefesh is something that, you know, that's what you have to do, and therefore we would stay home. And they said it's pikuach nefesh, or it's limud Torah that's in threat. I heard numbers that a lot of the teenagers in the Haredi community, some like big numbers, are leaving because they really can't continue with the fact that the pandemic doesn't let the regular life to go on, and a lot are leaving, and they feel so threatened that they are willing to come against the rules of the government, and that's a big move. But we see again, women, Haredi, feminist, activist women came on Facebook and said to the women, the mothers, they said, don't send your kids. It's your responsibility. You have responsibility to your families, and you have to make sure that the kids are safe, the pandemic stops, and we have to take responsibility for everybody, and therefore keep the kids at home.
Thank you, Yael. Michal Avera Samuel, what has been working in the Ethiopian Israeli community in terms of women's leadership, and how have you seen the pandemic affecting progress?
I think the most effective thing we see is the Ethiopian community. They are getting together a lot. They take care of themselves in many ways. If it's supporting each other, and there is when the pandemic began, we saw those women, especially divorced women, unskilled job, those working in unskilled jobs, they've been immediately been affected, because they were the first person being fired or taking off this job, because they're cleaning her office, they've been closed, the school's been closed. So they become depending and isolated from everything. So from their friend, from their independent. So this is something we saw, and then from their family, because they support each other. And then it's something we felt the violence become more higher in this time. And there is two examples that we were so proud that it's helped those women to take each other by themselves first. Second, when the young leaders really taking the rules and taking a job, and then they decide to take care of each woman. They map the neighborhoods who needs support, even giving a food and buying any medical issues. This is something they took as a power, how we can take care of them ourselves. This is something many young leaders really took a role and go around and take care of the other women. And the other things that we saw, it's how we can create two groups together. We had a Zoom meeting and sessions with Haredis women, with Ethiopian leaders, speaking in session about the similar issue they are dealing with. It was the first time that the Haredis women and Ethiopian women sitting in a Zoom together and talking about their life, about their experience, how they deal with this, take care of the kids, and then how it's the continue keeping to the tradition. And this is something it was created because of COVID, and not because the stereotype and prejudice that they are really each one has in his view. But when it's COVID, they people to people, they talk and they understand and they open the door how it's going to be more comfortable to talk and to understand other societies also.
Thank you, Michal. Unfortunately, we're running out of time, and I want to ask Mazal quickly to talk a little bit about how the pandemic is affecting representation and leadership in Israel.
First of all, I will say that I want to relate to one question or one comment on the comments that talked about the Arab society. Just saying that there are many organizations in Israel, women organization, Arab women organization, like Voice Women Against Violence, like Musawa, like Kian, like Ajik, many organizations that are working to advance women leadership in the Arab society, and we are working with them with collaboration, same as we do with all many other organizations, and we are dealing with that. In terms of culture, this is important that they will lead the activities there. And for your question, what was very disturbing, as we are saying that the representation in the Knesset, and I see that Ruth wrote a message on the Ruth Messenger wrote a comment on the representation in USA. We understand when the pandemic occurred and started, there was a special committee in Israel, and there were no woman representation in this committee that is going to deal with the war, civil war, totally civil war, because we are talking about health and we are talking about women that are sit at home with their children, and education system that is closed, and so many aspects that influence directly, first of all, on women that stayed at home with the children. And we saw in survey that were and data that we know by data now that the most population that was hurt from the pandemic were women. More than 65 or even more lost their jobs. So it was amazing from our perspective that the committee that is going to deal with how to deal with the pandemic, how to go into the close down, how to go out from the close down, is with no women representation. So we actually did, I know that many organizations, not only WePower, but also Network and all the organizations did atumot, I don't know, I forgot the word, for atuma, and we actually, sorry?
Petition.
Okay, thank you, petition, and we made a lot of noise around it. And yes, after a while, a while more women nominated to this committee. So we already see that in this pandemic, the women are the most hurt by that, but less represented in solving those issues.
Thank you, Mazal. Before we go, I want Michal Gera Margaliot to speak to this briefly. But Michal, I'd also like you to answer one of the questions that came in, which is, how can we bring Arab Israeli women into this conversation? So you got to do all of that in, less than a minute. Just kidding. You can have 2 minutes. Go.
So I think that also Mazal referred to that. I will say that this. First of all, everybody suffers from COVID-19 in Israel and all around the world. But we know that women suffered severely in two different areas. First of all is domestic violence, huge increase here in Israel, which is really very, very bad. And the second is the employment market. In the second lockdown, like Mazal said, 70% of the people who lost their jobs are women. And although this is the situation, we do not see that in representation, not in the specialist force that got a mandate from the government that Mazal was talking about. And in that specialist force, it's not only that there were no women, there were also no Arabs. And I want to connect to what you just asked, Jamie. And most of the people who sat there came from economy or physics, which there was no welfare, there was no education, there was almost no health, sitting in a place that got a mandate from the government to create the exit strategy from the first lockdown in Israel, which is really, it's unbelievable. And the fact that they just don't see us. And the second thing about representation, that also the governmental cabinet has only one woman inside of it, out of 10. Which really can't be. Of course, there are no Arabs in the government in Israel. We know that, and also the Minister of Welfare and the Minister of Education are outside this cabinet. And we know that, generally speaking, women bring more of that perspective to the table, and we're really missing that. There's a huge gap between professionals that's sitting in the different ministries, and some of them do care, and some of them are really trying to do their work, and the elected in Israel that do not see these issues almost at all.